All right, we're live. We got Rob Dew with us again. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I decided to call this series
Uh-huh.
Suspended Judgment because I think that that's such a wonderful concept, especially in today's day and age, is how can we look at things, examine them, but in so doing, try to sort of realize what the disservices are, again, to use similar
Mm-hmm.
language, of something is, rather than saying, oh, that's so bad or that's so terrible or I think this is good, but just to look at things and to try and understand what their consequences may be.
Yeah, and in so doing, you will be give more accurate predictions because you won't be attached to a judgment you have around something.
It is difficult, though, I mean, in our world, to get away from our own biases
Mm-hmm.
and our hidden biases. I mean, we are a product of our environment, and sometimes our environment can be quite visible. Its influences on us, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can think, oh, I'm this way, and I'm so accepting of others, but then it's like, well, who do you have in your circle that maybe isn't so accepting that you can have a meaningful conversation with, or words to that effect. um, Last time we talked about education a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and you mentioned that you brought up some articles. And
Well, a couple that I just wanted to mention. Keeping on with this topic, really famous one that came out in 2019, a book that was published, not an article, called "The Coddling of the American Mind," and this set off a bit of controversy. There was, of course, a lot of hit pieces in response to it. Some people agreeing, many people not. And it was written by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. I just want to give them credit, and your listeners can go and track that down. There's also YouTube experiences by these appearances by these gentlemen, so you can experience it across media. And the book says a lot of things. There's quite a lot to it. I'll just pull up the blurb here. Um, Named one of the best books of 2018, New York Times, Financial Times, Bloomberg, et cetera, et cetera. But they talk about a lot of things, but primarily they describe the sort of confluence of events that has led to a certain type of young person that's being produced. Okay. Again,
right.
not having judgment, not saying all these damn kids, they aren't like us, they're wrong. They're exactly the way that we've programmed them to be, that programming being both conscious and unconscious.
Hmm.
And so what they highlight is that starting around 2014, they had narrowed it down to a date. College professors all around the country began reporting, "Oh my gosh, I had all these students complaining about professors, even liberal conservative professors, liberal conservative students saying, well, this he said this and he shouldn't have said that,' complaining about the content of the course, not even necessarily much about the professor's opinion of their work, although there was that. In general, there was this tremendous rise in sensitivity.
Hmm.
And so one of the summations is that we've raised a generation of very sensitive, very coddled, very protected children. So we'll look at the evidence. Starting in the 90s, childhood has really changed. Children don't play outside. I don't know about Canada, but in America, children really don't play outside. Pretty much they're picked up from school. Some kids don't even ride the bus. In urban environments, middle class folks, they pick their kids up or have the nanny do it. That's very common in LA. There's a queue of parents just picking up children. There's no walking home from school. There's no free time. They are shuffled from classroom to after school activity to soccer to violin lesson and so on and so forth. Their time is very structured. And what this means is they're never just hanging out with kids and working out their social dynamics and working out when someone says something mean or nasty or untrue or unfair or racist or sexist or what have you. Then how do you deal with that? Do you confront the person, or competing for toys if
Hmm.
you're
Hmm.
talking about little kids, and so on and so forth. And so many of them, because they're only really allowed to be around their classmates in highly structured environments, we've
And highly
eliminated
supervised.
highly supervised. I mean, they get lunch. They get lunch and they get the halls,
Yeah.
right? And that's very limited time in both instances. So they really have not developed the social skills. So this relates into how, many of the kids don't relate well to others. They don't do well in dorms because now they have to deal with the living standards and qualities and precepts of others. Now, this dovetails with technology because now you have a world that you can live. We're living on it right now. And you can be inside your home and never have to interact with those pesky humans, or only do so in a very limited fashion with individuals you found who share your interests and curiosities online. And you can delete that connection with a touch of a button. So it's very non-committal that way. This has led to many people communicating very viciously online because there's no consequence. You're never going to meet this person. They live in Michigan. I can say whatever I want to them. And that's, of course, a fun thing to do. And we all know how Twitter and all these various things work to sort of exacerbate that. So now when you're in a live situation, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? And so many folks feel awkward. So you have this sort of coddled generation. You have, of course, the helicopter parenting, which was, I believe, I don't know, I don't know if there's dates for that, but I mean, it sort of was a term in the early 2000s, I believe, maybe earlier.
Many sort of state the correlation of the helicopter parenting with, who was the guy who's going around kidnapping kids in the 90s?
Yes.
In
these
Vancouver.
researchers actually linked it to 95. And I think there must have been an incident in 95. I don't know that detail, but maybe it's the person you're talking about. I mean, the kids showing up on milk carts and that whole thing. And from that point on, you just see the parents sort of sucking the kids in. Well, what is 95? Well, it happens to be 18 years after 2014, when all of these highly coddled kids.
Oh, yes. Right.
Were showing up in the college. They said they started to see it in 2013, and then in 2014, or it hit in a wave. And college presidents all across the country were conferring, and professors as well, saying, "What the heck happened? I'm dealing with a different,
from out of nowhere, right?
I'm dealing with a different type of person who is not very self-sufficient." And they go on and cite studies in this book, Coddling of the American Mind, that say that this generation of youth is not nearly as mature as previous generations. They haven't, possibly they're having sex later. That's not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that their rate of experience,
just one of the products of it.
the time and the age at which they're getting their car, their driver's license later. For certain generations of Americans, I imagine somewhat true in Canada, 16 rolls around. I mean, some people get it at 15 because they get a special suspension and say, "Oh, I got to work," or something like that. But you get it on your 16th birthday. You're there taking your driver's license because that means freedom.
That is huge. Yeah,
huge.
That's huge freedom.
So we're seeing just all these markers in life. They're doing them later. Okay.
Leaving the home.
Of course, there's financial things that come in with that. And the older generations as well, up until the millennials, they're buying home later. Well, they haven't accumulated the wealth. So we're creating this different type of person. Also, one last thing I wanted to mention, parents are having less kids and they're having them later in life. And from having taught in after-school education, I used to teach chess in elementary schools and high schools around LA primarily. You would often see, you would see a very attractive youngish mothers who had the one kid, and they certainly were very well off, and their job seemed to be to take care of this kid. And there was a lot of coddling. There was a lot of helicopter parenting, a lot of over concern. And when you have one child, just by nature, I mean, all parents that had multiple children know you're a lot better and a lot more relaxed on the second one. But if you're having one and you're having one, that's the deal.
That's your nest egg.
Huh?
Deep within the recesses of your mind, that's your nest egg.
That's right.
Your one
We got to
child.
get this right. We got to get this right. We have one chance to get this right.
Yeah.
And so, it's a different whole relation. And the fact that they're older, people having kids at 38, 40 and older, you're in a different mindset. You're much more permissive. You're much more, I've seen, let's remember, those parents who have kids at 40 will be going to their graduation at 58. They will be grandparent age fully.
Yeah.
Maybe even great grandparent age by different generational standards. And so their level of permissiveness, I've seen this in some of my own friends where they're, their age definitely affected their parenting style, and they weren't as able to relate to the kids. And as they
They
got
can't
older, they
keep
were
up.
less willing and less energetic to deal with the problems that come with high school boys. So all of these factors are combining. And again, it's not anyone's fault. It's a number of factors that are going on that are contributing to a different type of human being. And of course, again, the technology being a huge, huge influence
Yes.
because these kids are getting the average age that an American child gets their cell phone is 10 years old. I looked it up myself for specifically to find that out.
10
And
years old is the average.
that's what they're saying is the average. And it's been going down. I've tracked it. It's been going down because it becomes a tool of safety. The parents can always
Mm.
reach you. I'm in
Yeah.
trouble. Call
And
this.
daycare on demand, right? Watch your show.
Absolutely. And also, of course, the devices are babysitting aids.
Yeah.
At dinner, I was at dinner the other night in Orlando, and the child was just sitting looking at the iPad for the entire meal, never looked up, never said anything. The adults had their conversation. I mean, I get it. I
Yeah.
get why that would be great as an adult, but that child is not learning skills like how to interact with adults and sit at a table and behave, essentially.
The other thing to that is go ahead and try and take that thing away from the child and see what happens.
Once you give it to them, and I know parents who do the restrictions, okay, 2 hours a night or 4 hour, whatever
Yeah.
hours a night, once they have it, they're going to want it always. It'd be like, hooking someone on cigarettes and say, okay, now only 3,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
not going to be they're going to find ways. Hey, I got to do homework on there, or they're going to find ways around it, and they're going to throw a hissy fit. And of course, there's a lot of tapes. And if you go and watch Calling of the American Mind, I think they have some great videos they've accumulated of children throwing complete meltdowns
Mhm.
once their technology was taken away, even after having used it for hours. It's a complete all-encompassing world. We
Right.
know and recognize those effects on us when our phones are constantly saying, hey, here's an article you might like. Hey, somebody liked your photo.
Right.
We recognize and we can choose, most of us, consciously to participate or not. But for kids, that's a little tougher ask because they're basically have something, the computers and particularly phones are specifically designed. All the guys in, I'm sure you've seen the movie The Social Dilemma.
I know the premise of it. I mean,
Okay,
it's
that's a
it's
good one to
marketed
see.
for simplicity.
I would say so. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, it's a very broad piece, but
A touch screen,
I
right?
thought it was
Like,
very effective.
yeah.
And, they say very specifically, very pointedly that they designed their services to addict people. I mean, the idea is the more that you're using the service, the more eyeballs they can claim for the longer periods of time, the more they can charge advertisers and so on and so forth. So they specifically designed them to do that. I mean, it's very much like a casino. It keeps you coming back for more.
Yes.
You're always checking the phone and you get a message and all that. And we're all addicted to that. So let's not judge.
Yeah.
Including my own dear mother here in Florida.
Right.
Oh yeah. I mean, her and
Well,
I,
I mean, I get on it too. Like, I'll be, I'll, you know, on my phone doing the endless scroll, and what I think is a split second, like it's just like a gaze. Like I'm sure my eyes are glossed over, and then I'm like, holy smokes, I'm realizing that I'm doing this. So I'm not one to judge.
yeah,
It's meant to suck us in.
yeah. And you're dealing with a child's mind, which is still forming,
Right.
still developing the ability to resist. I mean, they say that's one of the greatest determinants of success is the ability to delay gratification.
Yeah. The
And
marshmallow
kids who
test.
can't do it, who will always reach for the candy or the sweet thing when offered, as opposed to, hey, we'll give you 2 if you can wait an hour. This is a real indication of future addiction issues.
Well, and I think going, the parallels to this is that it's this instant gratification with technology. And again, that's just what it is. It's instant gratification. Whenever you want, you can have it right now. So what are the hidden effects of that on our mind from a young age?
Great
Right.
question. I'll start with one for sure that I've discovered with my students: lack of perseverance. In other words, when you encounter obstacles in pursuit of your goal, very often they don't have the fortuitiveness to overcome the obstacles, to go around the obstacles, to find a different path. I couldn't find it. It's not there. And this isn't universal. And again, we're talking degrees. We should make that caveat that many of the students are quite good, but by their own admission, they can get easily frustrated. I've talked to them about them. I've asked these questions. What do you think? Is this true of your generation and your friends? And that, they often can get frustrated. For example, when they encounter a paywall on a news article or something they want to experience, they're not going to pay for it. They're going to find a way around the paywall, or they're going to read the article from a different source, or they're not going to read it. I mean, this is how it's going to work for them. Okay. They don't expect to pay for things, and they expect for things to come up. I mean, to have to do a really elaborate search, and also they're somewhat under the illusion that everything in the universe is on the internet. And of course, we know that that's not true. Many things have not been converted, especially things that were not popular, music and other media. You can't find every movie. You can't find every song. Some artists, of course, Bob Dylan famously, Metallica, take down their music when it's put up online. So everything isn't accessible, but they expect it is, and that's what they've been told, and that's our sort of myth about the internet, that everything's accessible. So there's a little frustration I see them experience when it's difficult, or when they have to look for more interesting sources. Very often they'll just go to this is an article that, they won't look beyond or get a counter article or realize that the source they've picked is highly biased.
I think there's something here too, in the sense of early adolescent development or early child development, the cortex, and how it's constantly pruning information. And that's that shaping effect is what we can get. We're just going to keep getting what we can get. If we can't get that article, like you said, if we can't get that content, that information, we're just going to get different content and information. What is accessible is what we access.
And what people excel at is what they're good at, or what comes easily to them.
Sure, yes.
You get that first stroke. Oh, wow, you got a good arm. Oh, wow, you write well. And so they continue to do it. And then the opposite is true. If they get a critique from an adult about their drawing or their voice at a young age, they can assume that that's not something for them.
On the whole, would you say that confidence is declining or increasing in students academically? Like
I can't answer that accurately. I don't have I don't want to make that statement. I would, because I can't answer it accurately. I don't feel comfortable, but I would say that some of them are irrationally confident in their abilities. And this, of course, is the Dunning-Kruger effect, the very famous Dunning-Kruger effect, which I'm sure you've heard of.
Refresh my...
Okay, the Dunning-Kruger effect is a very influential study. I believe it was done in the 90s, but it could have been later, in which they discovered that across vast swaths of industry, incompetent individuals are not only incompetent based on taking a test that asks questions about their industry. In other words, they ask nurse questions, but the last question on the test is always the same. How do you think you did on the test? And what they found is that people who scored very poorly almost always, not always, but almost always thought they were very good. In other words, they would rate themselves in the 9th percentile and finish in the 20th. And in some cases, when there were interaction with the people conducting the study, they were almost quite indignant. You must have graded it wrong. This test is stupid. Yet it was a standard test that asked what was thought to be basic knowledge in any given profession. So you do see a rise of that. You do so. A lot of people are very confident about their opinions because they've gotten them from the internet, and they've discovered a whole community of people who believe as they do. What they don't know is that's a bubble. Okay, you've just penetrated a bubble. It isn't the bubble, because there isn't the bubble, but that doesn't matter to them, and we can all be guilty of this. They think they find a kernel of knowledge. They discover Alex Jones if they're on the conservative side. They discover the Drudge Report. Or they discover some more liberal sort of out thought. Maybe they discover Anonymous or Occupy, and Echo chambers and information bubbles are quite common, and that can lead to irrational confidence in opinions.
Right.
And then also, I think in our society today, there's this thought that you have to be irrationally confident, and that you have to
Mm,
be very confident in yourself, and that there's a lot of opposing opinions out there, and you've got to sift through it all, but also hold true to your values. Who knows if your values are very good if they've been communicated to you by parents who themselves are misinformed. And so at the same time, there's a real lack of confidence in the
right.
general public in experts, in institutions, and in particularly in college institutions and college professors as arbiters of information and so forth.
Have you heard of I'm probably getting this researcher's name wrong, but Carol Dweck?
Say it again, Karen
Ca-
DeWitt.
or Carol Dweck. She wrote
It
she wrote the
sounds
book.
familiar, but
She she wrote a lot about fixed mindsets and growth mindsets and the
okay.
sort of application of so many young people, especially in my line of work as a clinical counselor. We're seeing I see a lot of people with fixed mindsets. Now, that's just based on where I am seeing this, right? Um, the phenomenology of it is I'm just in the lower mainland of Canada, of BC, but I'm seeing a lot of kids with fixed mindsets. Now, is that indicative of their cultural background, so on and so forth? I don't know. But generally speaking, there's this idea, and I think that there's a more in I think it's more insidious as we're sort of talking about than it
Yeah.
just being like, you know,
Well,
the
there's
road to
again,
hell is paved in good
there's
intentions.
on both the left and the right,
Yes.
not just white folk or and throughout classes. I would say the upper classes tend to have a little more respect for institutions because, of course, the society has worked for them. But I mean, you could counter that. There's a general disrespect for authority and knowledge. We see it in the presidential election. Remember in 2000, people thought Gore was just too smart to be president, just too much of a
Mm,
bookworm. But I can have a beer with George Bush. I mean, that's a very obvious and trope-like example, but it goes much deeper. Um, and it should be said that the society and institutions have given the people many legitimate reasons
yes.
not to trust them, not the
Yeah.
least of which is the enormous cost that people are paying for college, which is more often than not taught by adjunct professors, not by full professors who are researchers and truly learned in the field. And I can say that as an adjunct. I don't. I'm sure there are many, many very learned adjuncts, and many of them have also doctorates. That's also true. But you're dealing with a different type of collegiate educator now. You're not dealing with someone who's been there for years, is tenured, and is a
Mm.
lifelong academic. You're dealing with someone who's struggling to make ends meet with by pairing a couple jobs together. So. Um, I think also, I'm certainly could see conservative parents teaching their kids, hey, don't let those liberals fill your mind with a bunch of bad ideas. I mean, and to some extent, that has always existed in Americana because there's always this respect for the frontier. And um, I'll give you an example: Star Trek. I mean, Spock represented academia. He's intellectual. He knows everything, Captain. Da da da. Scotty knew how the ship worked, but in the end, Kirk would make a decision most often from his gut,
And
which
he
is
he
what
you know what? Now that you say that, he very much was like an American frontiersman, Captain Kirk.
he shot from the hip. He did things irrationally. He
Yeah,
would,
yeah.
if he had to seduce the green woman on the planet, he'd do it. He just sort of, as far as adhering to the stated goal of the Federation to not interfere with planets, that doesn't happen at all at the series. We can throw that out, but that's fine. That's
Yes.
just narrative. But he's very much in the tradition of John Wayne and other types of characters that come many of Clint Eastwood's type characters um, who just make these sort of decisions from their gut. They decide what's wrong is right, and they're going to punch you in the face to make sure you understand.
What I do love is these archetypes, these Clint Eastwood has now taken that same character, but has placed him in a postmodern world, and to see their failings against that. Whereas in the 60s and the 70s, the American spirit could never be broken. But
Very
now,
good.
yeah,
Very good observation. Summarized very well in the film No Country for Old
for old
Men.
men.
And you're right. A lot of Clint Eastwood's characters are these honorable men who live by a different code. That was true in Gran Torino, and I didn't see The Mule, but and they're running into youth gangs or what have you, a new code on the streets. And of course, because it's a hero piece for Clint Eastwood, they die heroically, I suppose, saving the day or making an example and showing the youth of America that their code is crap and the old guys know what they're talking
Right.
about. And what this really is, and I read another very interesting article today. What this really is about is the American right and American traditionalists, of which there are some on the left somewhat, and democratic traditionalists. Their world is fading away. The value system is fading away. And the old tropes and ideas do not play with the younger generation. They're tearing down, statues of Civil War heroes and melting them down to make, something bike racks for electric bikes or something, and
Is that
these
actually
people,
true? Is
the
that
truth of the
what
matter
happened?
is they've already lost the war. I mean, unless they can do something dramatic and extreme, which will be on the table in 2024, and elect a fascist like Trump or some person like that, and really plunge the country into a period of dark ages. They've already lost the war, and they're complaining and whining, and culture, cancel culture and critical race theory. They're attacking these things because their culture is already disappearing. It's sort of like that scene in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where the memories of Joel are disappearing, as,
Right.
oh, wait a minute, kids aren't going to the sock hop like they used to, or, well, golly gee, the girls don't wear hoop skirts no more. That I exaggerate with my
Right.
example, but yeah, old forms of media, old rituals. I mean, are kids going to formal dances organized by adults where they're paired off, and they used to call them cotillions? I think those have, all gone away. And in addition, you have a rising ethnic population, let's say the Latina population, which has a quinceañera, the 16th, I believe it's the 16th birthday for a girl, maybe it's younger, is a big celebration, a big coming out party for her. And I mean, that's it's fine tradition, but it's not, American Protestants haven't done that. So yeah, I mean, their world is fading away, and they're not happy about it. And some people will be willing to get violent to fight for it.
Well, I mean, that's so many pieces are kind of hidden too. I mean, the idea of religion and how it's so deeply rooted in the United States in terms of the dispensationalist narrative,
Mm-hmm.
things like this, millennialists.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the rhetoric on the side of, for example, the people who are against the vaccination fits the dispensationalist narrative of the end times. And then you wonder why that's so effective, that argument, and how it plays out is, again, because in the 19th century, the British was very forward thinking. They were like, technology is going to pull us through. This is the 19th century. And then World War I happened, and they
Mm-hmm.
realized, holy shit, our technology could kill us. Meanwhile, the isolationists in America, they're sort of separate from what was going on. They knew of it, of course, but they were kind of landlocked in their own origins, and that was the religious narratives. And then as things came over, it was this weird mixing pot, and it's playing out today
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of, we're coming up against a wall here.
Mm-hmm.
We're going into a head-on collision, and nobody's wearing their seatbelts.
I would say so. I would say there's a cultural collision and reckoning. I would say that there are many institutions that will fade away or diminish over the coming years.
And do you
You've got
think
a
it will
baby
be a
boom
fade away?
generation. What's
Do you
that?
think it's gonna do you think it's gonna be a fade away, or do you think it's gonna be
Some things will fade away.
much more sudden?
Um, well, what do they say about certain disasters? It's very slow for a long time, and at the end, all of a sudden,
Mm,
it's very sudden. It's sort of like, it slowly,
the
slowly.
vortex, right?
Right, exactly,
Yeah,
and then in the last quarter, it speeds up quite, you know. Also, exponential growth works this way. If you're
right.
doubling every, at some
The
point,
pond
real
lily.
quick to the point where the water goes over,
Yeah,
yeah, things are fine, and then all in the last half hour, things aren't fine. So, no, I think you'll see that. Some things will fade away or will exist, but in a grossly diminished form. They won't be, the cultural icons that they were. Newspapers, printed newspapers are headed that route. They'll transform into online newspapers as they already have, but
right.
that will become more the case. At some point, they will say, "Do we really need to be printing this paper?" And there'll be fewer boomers around going, "Oh, we still love our papers," and more environmental millennials and Gen Z are saying this is ridiculous, and they're right.
We talk about the division between so much of what's happening is a matter of divisions.
Hmm.
Has the world ever been this divided before to its
Oh,
own
yeah.
knowledge?
I
Would
mean,
you
if
say?
you really
Yeah,
look at the history of the world, we live in a remarkably peaceful time. I mean,
right.
murder, rape, and
How many people
enslavement
actually die in
were
terrorist acts?
were sort of the
Yeah,
currency of the day for, I don't know, a couple millennia. I mean, maybe since the Enlightenment, things have gotten better. Of course, no, wait a minute, we had slavery here in America. No, I mean,
mm,
things have gotten a lot better. People want to say they haven't, but in this country, race relations and gender relations, gender relations now are in a difficult stretch. But I mean, women's rights have certainly got better. The impoverished all around the world, even in places like Bangladesh, that the birth rate in Bangladesh, one of the poorest, you know, most religiously soaked countries in the world, with people with just an abject poverty that gets flooded, the little
mm,
scrap of land that they have gets flooded annually. They're actually reducing the birth rate there. And, there's been tremendous improvements in education and health all around the world. There
right.
really has. So, we have to say that. Um, but all of this has also been, done on the back of cheap or nearly free energy. And that's the problem we're going to run into. There's talk that fusion is on the horizon. I've also read some papers saying that's bullshit. So, unless we can get to some other very cheap energy, I would say within the next 10 to 15 years tops, then you're going to there's going to be serious breakdowns in society along energy supply and food lines. And by the way, we're seeing it now. Hello. It's sort of easy for me to make that statement now because we have tremendous supply lines disrupted by a black swan event like the COVID-19 virus, COVID-19 illness, I guess, coronavirus. Where do you want to go?
Well, I'm just thinking like so much. We're looking like in my job.
Uh-huh. Let's bring it back to kids.
Yeah, well, that's just it, right? We judge kids. We look at the products. We look at the products of society, but not the producers. And really, what it takes is we got to look at the parenting that's going into this, right? I mean, so much in the last 10, 15 years, it's like teachers are afraid to have the conversations with parents about their
Oh,
kids.
yeah.
Like they just try to manage it. But really, it's like when are we going to go back to saying, hey, you got to figure out what's going on with your kid, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, let's kind of step back and just make an overall statement about what's going on in
yeah,
society. What you have is a fraying of the overall fabric in society. And this has occurred through the acceleration of wealth. There were always rich and poor people,
right.
always have been. But when America becomes the world power post-depression, post-World War II, and into the 50s and 60s, where our economy is just through the roof and the whole thing. And that, of course, is the time when we developed the standard for the middle class, which became the standard for the world, or the goal of the world was really the 50s and 60s in America, maybe late
Yes.
40s, maybe. Um, Unprecedented in human history, largely, where that much wealth trickled down to that many folk. Okay. But we're in a very unique times right now, driven again a lot by technology, and people are more separated. There isn't a sort of unity of thought that occurred in America. When I was a kid, if I was really misbehaving, I'm talking as a young kid, so this would have been 70s.
Yeah.
I don't know how my parents would have felt if someone else had given me a spanking, but I could get a stern talking to or a little arm jerk if I
Mm-hmm.
was, get away from there. We told you not
Mm-hmm.
to do that. That was perfectly permissible. No one would do that now. Okay. Throw into the mix here of the proliferation of lawsuits, petty lawsuits, and the proliferation of lawyers. We produce, throughout the 80s, that was the thing. You want your son to be a doctor or a lawyer. So guess what? We produce hundreds of thousands of them, more than we actually need, as it turns out. And, you have a surplus of lawyers, they'll lower their prices to where anyone can file a frivolous lawsuit. So, all this thing has happened, and you've seen this fraying of the American society, and it connects to media. You don't have three channels giving you information. You now have hundreds, and it's all different information, as we discussed before, tailored for that specific audience. So you just don't see the same values. Of course, the 60s was a huge fraying in the society, where you had a generation that really almost bifurcated itself from the rest of society. And by the way, in the way of prediction, I think you will see that. I don't know if it's going to be the Gen Zers. It may be the kids who come after, or some sort of blend. But I think you will see a spate of rebellious youth, especially as they realize that, and as the data points come in, tornadoes wiping out entire towns, more hurricanes destroying more property, and so on and so forth, and heat waves and fires and so forth. As they begin to realize that they're inheriting a world that's got a lot of problems, I think you will see, and simultaneously, as that baby boom generation clutches to the power and the money, through their stooges in Congress and so forth, you will see some real rebellion and some acting out, and even some aberrant behaviors that don't make sense. But it's just, when someone who's not terribly intelligent or informed realize that they're screwed, they aren't going to make a logical response. They're going to have a tangential response to it that seems really misshapen and like a poorly formed idea. But that's what you're going to see.
Well, it's like child soldiers. Why are they so dangerous? Because they don't understand their own mortality.
There you go.
And if you,
They'll run into battle. Next time I'm forming a militia army, I'll keep that in mind.
yeah, what?
Joke
And that's just it. Is that if you give young people, like I loved heavy metal as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Why did I love heavy metal? Because I thought it understood me,
Yeah.
right? When you have, and I was an outlier.
Yeah.
But as you take tons of youth and they feel like they're not heard, their parents are too busy, they're working. I mean, that's the other thing, is that with the influx of technology, it's like the car, right? When the car came in, well, we could get to where we need to be faster. So then there's a higher expectation on what we're able to produce.
And look how just talking about heavy metal, because you know a lot about it. Look how that aesthetic, you go back to, I guess go back to Breakfast Club.
Yes.
Bender
Yeah.
is sort of, almost, it's hippie. It's actually punk more than anything. It's a punk rock aesthetic, but it's drifting.
He represents the left behind of
the
youth.
left behind. It's drifting into metal, and a lot of the kids who would have been punk, that were punk in the 70s, either their brothers and sisters became heavy metal or metal in the 80s, and so forth and so on. But I mean, that aesthetic, the long hair, the sort of checked out attitude, probably involving weed and alcohol, whatever. No judgments. The black t-shirts, the jeans, the ratty jeans, the shirt, maybe graduating to black leather jackets studded with
with the sleeves cut off.
Yeah, whatever. that whole look became a look that became like a subgenre person, goth did as well. I mean, you don't
Yeah.
see those in just any, I don't know how many goth teens we have in Kansas, but I know you have them in any urban environment, in any place where there's a lot of rain, any place, in the northern part of the US, that
Sure.
includes you, Canada,
Yeah.
north of US. I know they've got those type of personas, and they provide an aesthetic, and as you said, it understands you, and it provides answers, and it makes sense of your world, which is a lot of that music is fuck you. A
Yeah.
lot of that music is this sucks. I don't have any solutions as to how to get myself out of this situation and why it sucks. I'm just going to write a song and beat on a drum to tell you about how much it sucks.
What's funny though about that aesthetic is that I listen to metal music nowadays relative to what I heard growing up, and I'm like, this is very different. What's being said here,
Yeah.
from what I'm picking up, it used to be like Slipknot, for example. Their first two albums, it was like, holy shit, like this kid
What
needs
do
a
they
hug.
talk about? Killing yourself?
Well, it was like fuck you, right? Like
Yeah.
fuck you, don't talk to me, leave me alone, or I'll go psycho, right?
Right.
Words to that effect. Nowadays, it's like, the world is the world is bleeding, and you're like, whoa, okay, like they're almost trying to like use that energy to help the world, kind of thing. The message and the philosophy is interesting how it's changed. It's also
Absolutely.
become much more commercial,
And then
right?
you
So
got Norwegian black metal, and you get off of
burning
those.
churches, yeah.
What's that?
The Norwegian black metal, and they were burning the churches and things
Yeah.
like that, right?
Well, as McLuhan says, eventually the audience wants to participate with the media.
Mm. Oh,
So
well, that's totally what's happening
So the
today.
first thing you do, you get the black T-shirt at the concert.
Yeah.
Then you start to grow your hair out. Then you go for the tattoos if your band is a tattoo band. Then you shave your head, or you begin to, you want to participate. Then you go to the riot, the rally, the festival, the whatever it is, to fully participate in the culture and become branded by it. You get your in Burning Man you get a name.
So, and that's the other sort of thing, is that I was having this conversation with a student of mine the other day, and we're talking about Coco Melon, which is an infant show, and it
Mhm.
talks about the songs and things like that. And we're talking about how the content of this is that you learn nursery rhymes, right? That's the content. But really, what is going on here? Like, what are you actually getting from this? And it's the hidden psychic effects. It's sort of like when when a kid plays Call of Duty or video games. It's like, what are you're trying to get to the goal, but what are the hidden changes that are happening to you? And I think nowadays, about the media and everything that's out there right now, what are the hidden effects
Okay,
of
let's
what
get.
it
I've
is
got
that we're
another
being?
one.
Go
Of
for it.
course, all this proliferation of media, we talked about music and heavy metal, it leads to hero worship. So you want to be James Hetfield. You want to be that individual that you see on the album cover, or the athlete, or the movie star, or what have you. And that's natural. That's happened for a long time. But
Yeah.
a lot of individuals want to do that, but they, number one, have no idea how to do it, may or may not have talent. And, they want to, you see a lot of folks who are wanting to jump the line and go right to,
Yes.
I want to open, we're going to open for Metallica this summer, but next summer we're headlining. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a, I mean, young people kind of always been guilty of that, but I just, let me relate it to another field. I just read a fascinating article about recent deaths on Mount Everest, and there was a famous photo taken, and literally there's a red line of parkas. Most people wear red or yellow parkas to be seen up the mountain. I mean, a straight line. There's not any separation. It's butt to nut of fools trying to climb Mount Everest on an incoming storm. And there were so many people.
Oh, yes, yes,
There were
yes.
so many people, and the window had narrowed to just a couple days. They all rushed to get up the mountain. And so now they're all standing in line at all the treacherous cross points. They're all standing in line. So while you're taking 20 minutes to get across this, this impasse, you're holding up all these other people who are, being exposed, the temperature's dropping, all this stuff. So a bunch of people died. And it's the height of hubris. And it's an example. And now what's happened, because it's so popular, some discount Sherpas have or discount expeditions. Now
2-for-1
prices are
Sherpa.
dropping to the point where, I mean, you can spend 38. There was an example in the article of a guy who spent $65,000 to climb Mount Everest and nearly die, and see a couple of his friends die. Smart choice, buddy. On that, I do have judgment.
Well,
But hey, it's his money. But the prices have been coming down, making it a little more accessible to people of lesser means. But there's a corresponding quality as well. Everything is now accessible. Everyone can go cruising. There's a
exactly.
cruise
Yes.
for everyone. There's a college for everyone. In our rush for equality, not a bad goal. We've tried to make every experience, even those that were once exclusive and expensive, we've strived to make every experience accessible all the way down to maybe not the working poor, but down to the working class. And that's largely true. A working class person could afford a Vegas vacation with the right package, and this might be a horrible hotel and you're looking at a concrete wall out their window, but hey, we're here in Vegas.
Well, I mean, you actually mentioned something earlier, kind of a separate subject, but important nonetheless, is that we're using our sensitivities almost as a weapon, right?
Absolutely.
And that to me is problematic, because it's like when a kid's okay, let me try and flesh this one out as I go. But rather than cater to your trigger, we have to face that trigger. Right.
Yep.
But as a society, I think that we're trying to like, does that trigger anybody? If it triggers anybody, we're going to create a safe space over here. It's like at some point, it's like we have to become trigger less. Or
absolutely.
We have to become trigger.
And this is all discussed in the Coddling of the American Mind.
Right.
And it runs the danger, and I believe it was criticized for this, of sounding like "get off my lawn." These kids today just have to be tougher. They should put up with the same stupid racism I did. That's not true. That's clearly it's a false take, and I think what they were saying. But I get it. But you're making other people responsible for your sensitivities. Oh, by the way, let's think about food. Already we see that catering to in vegetarian and vegan restaurants. And I'm not saying in no any way that their diet shouldn't be catered to. It's a business. If you can make money having vegetarian options on your menu, which you should, given the number of vegetarians out there, if you want the whole group to come to your restaurant, you should. But we see that happening. Different stores catering to your healthy needs. I know people that they will only shop and travel into places that are high vibe. They need to get their latte a certain way. So I can't go to Cancun, but I'll go to Tulum because they know how to do latte.
But maybe like I'm again two other there's a branch here.
Mm-hmm.
Death by choices. I mean, it's that old saying of, okay, I got 2 paintings for you. You choose. I forget what the name of the study was, but you choose one painting, but then that's it. You've made your choice. Versus, so the scenario is scenario A is this guy comes to you. You're a test subject. You choose between 2 paintings, both valued at some price, right? You don't know which one, but there's a difference, I'm pretty sure, in this study. And you have to choose one. So you pick picture A or picture B. That's the scenario. You pick it.
Mm-hmm.
Scenario 2, you pick picture A or picture B. You make your choice. And then 5 days later, they ask you, do you want to pick picture? Do you want to stay with that? Or do you want to take picture B? And so many people are like, they're like, it's the choice that's killing them. I also wonder how, again, this is a huge extrapolation, how this factors into divorce rates. Is there was a period in time when, in the 50s, it was like, okay, I guess I'm going to stick with Susie for the rest of my life. And, nowadays
you've hit on a great point. And that is, you have a lot more choices now. And there's another thing I think they talk about, I don't know how it's framed exactly, but complexity theory is basically the idea that as a civilization grows and progresses, it becomes more and more and more complex. Okay. And the skills necessary to operate this civilization. I mean, what percentage of the humans would you need to take out with a Thanos snap to make modern civilization utterly crumble. I mean, things like air traffic controllers and doctors, perhaps, and nuclear physicists, and certain people like that who have a highly specialized skills. And there's only a relatively finite number of them because the society is so complex that only highly specialized, highly trained people can operate it. And we've seen that with our relationships. Now relationships are complex. You could be bi, you can swing, you can, marriages have different arrangements, open marriages, so on and so forth. Plenty of people spend their life with one person and never get married. Some don't even live together. They just have their own construction. And so all that's become
Right.
possible, which is good. That in that
Yeah.
area in particular, we've grown. But what it does for the new person arriving, the young people that you and I deal with, is it opens up a plethora of choices, not all of them necessarily being shown by good examples, because I think there's good examples of all those life choices of people who swing healthy and swing unhealthy, or have open marriages that are healthy and open marriages that are unhealthy. And, they're getting exposed to all that, also without a large mythos that's rose up around it. All the mythos is around marriage and Christmas, right? I mean, you got plenty of Christmas movies. There's not a lot of Kwanzaa movies out there, and so you're getting fed with this old information, this old mythos, even while the world is completely changing. And what I see with my students is that many of them, I wouldn't say all of them, but many of them will, I couldn't say a percentage, but 40 at least, maybe half, maybe more, will be drawn to sort of some of those old traditional tropes. I want to get married.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I expose to my students every year during the marketing PR lesson that, diamonds are essentially worthless. This is a known fact. There's a ton of diamonds. They're controlled by the De Beers Corporation, and they artificially set the prices.
Yeah. And,
good luck getting any money out of your engagement ring, honey, no matter how many carats you think it is. It's a scam. It didn't used to be the case, but they started a marketing campaign in the 20s and 30s, I believe it was. I think it was the 30s. And they said, hey, if he loves you, he's going to buy a diamond as a symbol of forever. And I give all the students this information. At the end of them, I ask them, particularly the girls, are you willing to forsake this traditional choice? And most of them are not. Most of them want that. Now, there's a myth that's been exposed. And so I said to them, okay, fine, I get it. You want the myth. You want Christmas just as you remember it. But just be aware, anytime you or anyone from your generation complains about why things don't change, why are the older generations holding us in such stasis? And they are, and are, large, a lot to blame, but it's also the younger generations choosing to live in and choosing to adhere to traditional memes or liking them. And that's okay. That's a choice. But just realize that they're not the only choices out there, and they don't work for everybody. Oh, and by the way, they all come with a lot of lies and problems, and that marriage is a real challenge, and it's not easy to raise children.
What's it called? There's a word for it. I heard it one time, and then ever since I've heard it, I'm like, what is that word? And it's when you look back at the past. It's the act of you look at the past.
Nostalgia?
And no. It's like a really. What was the word?
Reminiscence?
No, it was a good word. I'm going to try and find it, but it's the act of we look back at the past and we think that times were way better than they were, when really the times were just as shitty as they are today.
Yeah.
Like when I look back, oh man, it was so good when I was a teenager.
I got another link for you. There's a great guy named Phil Zimbardo who did a lot of research on this, and he discovered that people live in 3 different times: past, present, and future.
Sure.
Have you checked this out before?
No shocker there, but go ahead.
For your listeners, you can go to a YouTube called The Secret Powers of Time. Really great. It's an RS animate, which means they're drawing what they're describing, and it's quite informative. I think it's only like 12 minutes. Very informative. And basically 3 different times. Some people live in the past, some people live in the present, some people live in the future. And there's a positive and negative manifestation. And really, what he's doing is categorizing, which means he's putting things in boxes. Probably what there is a spectrum.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's overlap in everything, right?
So people who live in the past, who are past positive, they remember the good times. They keep photo albums. They keep the family together. They're nostalgic. They're reminiscent. They love the song. They still love the songs they heard in high school and play them, whatever. A person who's negative has negative associations with the past. Okay. And the same goes through past, present, and future. People who are future oriented are always working, they're not living in the moment. They're squirreling away for a potentially
Right.
gloomy future. People who live in the present, they got it right. I
Right.
like to think I live in the present. You can't, but the thing is, you can't always. You always have to
Yeah.
mine the past for learning from mistakes and also prepare for the future. I mean, it's impossible. But where is your major mental state? And
Yeah.
people who are very nostalgic, like the way you described, are people who live in the past. They're more interested in what went before.
Well, and there's been connections between people who live too much in the past have higher rates of depression, and people who live too much in the future have higher rates of anxiety.
That's right, because they're living out of time. If you're
Yeah.
always living for the future, I mean, it's a very important skill, don't get me wrong, but if you're always living for the future, you're never slowing down and enjoying yourself. And if you're bemoaning things that are never coming back,
Yes.
people who also live in the past are people who have a tendency not to change. If the 90s came around and you didn't get into grunge and you were still wearing your acid jeans and all of a sudden people were clowning on you and your bands weren't coming to town because nobody else liked them, and you can choose two paths. You can adjust and I'll check out the grunge, or you can, that stuff sucks. It used to be better. And then, you circle around a group of individuals who feel that way and also who are mutually choosing not to progress as human beings, visually or aesthetically, and often mentally. You'll stay in that mind state. And I see it all the time. When I first moved to LA, I had a friend who was kind of in the rock and roll scene, and there was this like hangover metal scene in LA in 2003 through 2005. How it survived that long, I don't know. But remember, the grunge thing came in sometime in 90. I don't remember. 90.
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was 92 or 94. Whenever Nevermind was released. It had been going on for years before, as you know.
And
But
just killed hair metal.
it killed hair metal. But
Yeah.
a
Because
decade
hair metal
later,
was like, it was going good, and then grunge came, and it was like,
and on the
it
radio, there's
decapitated.
documentaries about this as well. On the radio, it happened almost overnight. I mean,
Yeah.
I think within a matter of months, certainly within a year, rock radio shifted to this other thing, and it was just over for these bands. And of course, in those days, radio was king. You didn't have the internet to go, like you would have had all those metal bands going to their own private websites to release the music, which I guess they do now. But
to me, this brings up the question of, has music lost its power based on of, can something lose its power based on how we consume it? And in this case, I talk about music, how we consume. Like, I could go on Spotify.
Okay, yes, I will agree. Yes, music isn't as special. My friends who are painters have a hard time selling images. I tell them images are cheap. Why do I want to buy your painting that I can only share with people here on my wall that come to my bedroom, which are very select people now in these days, when I can get this image for free or maybe a 99 cents and have it on my computer and show it anywhere I have my computer.
Right.
Images are cheap. Photography, I mean, go to a stock photography site, type in the most obscure thing, naked men playing chess on an ice field, and there'll be photos of that because everybody has a camera now, and they've all been submitted and they've all been aggregated and so on and so forth. I'm sure there are some things, but images and music is cheap. You used to go, you went to, you bought the album, you had to have the album. That's where you broke up your weed.
Right.
Album,
Yes. Yeah.
And
or other drugs.
You had the art and you looked at it. Now you
Yes.
download it. There's none of that stuff. Now many people will go online to the band and read about the songs and all that. And some bands go to the trouble of creating companion artwork to go with digital stuff, but it's a whole different relationship and then, by the way, you're not buying the album, you're buying a song. I don't want to
Right.
hear everything you thought. I want to hear the song that I like today on the radio. Okay.
Well,
And then movies. Last point, movies.
yeah.
Again, if you're not going to a movie theater, you have to put on clothes to do that. People at some age in America dressed up to go to the movie theater. I haven't done that in a long time, but unless it was a date or something, but you're going out to a place. Movie theaters have gotten more mature. Now some are serving alcohol, or there is a bar attached. The Landmark down in LA had that. There was a really nice bar with food within the movie theater. So you could meet there and then go there and discuss afterwards. A very nice touch. All that's happened, but simultaneously, movies are for free on your services. Movies are for free on YouTube. You can plug it in and watch it on something this small, and you drop out of it the minute something else catches your attention, like someone texts you and wants to
Yes.
converse or something. I mean,
Well, even thinking about, sorry, no, go ahead.
It's just not special. It's like, oh, let's watch.
Yeah.
Well, now again, for some people, it's like, oh, the new Wes Anderson film is coming out. I mean, I would still say Tarantino, his film releases, maybe Scorsese for a certain generation because he's still making decent films into his dotage, and but a lot of other people, the Wes Anderson's big release. I guess there was some folks I saw on Facebook getting excited about the French Dispatch that was coming out, but it's just not quite the event that it used to be, because we used to have to go to the theater and be like, dude, man, so-and-so's films.
You gotta go see
Thursday.
it.
Dude, we got to go, man.
Yeah.
We got to get in line, or, I can't go through. I will go Friday at the matinee. That the specialness of that has been taken away, and gradually over time, movies, television,
Yeah.
and music has become more and more commodified. It's not something you cherish and you own. It's something that's readily available digitally that you access only when you need it.
That is such a good. Okay, so
Does that make a good point?
You made it. You always make good points, especially when they're points that I agree with.
Oh, yes.
Yes, yeah. But there is something about the object that we hold it. I gotta have the vinyl, right?
NFTs, baby.
Yeah.
You don't even
So
own
is that
it.
what it? Well, yeah.
It's a conceptual. You got to look that up. I mean, non-fungible tradable assets.
It's an idea that you own, but is that any different than what our current economic system is?
Exactly. It's getting more and more and more abstract. Less and less real. I mean, giving a company $10 and all 1,000 of us give a company $10 and they go and do something and they share their profits, that makes sense. But you can put $10 on a company to fail. You can put, you can bundle a bunch of, what they call CDOs, CDLs. I mean, you got all these different, elaborate instruments, financial instruments, they call them. And, you're
no different than a what?
Oh,
those
yeah,
guys,
there's
the water
insurance on
fairs
things,
Yeah.
It's highly abstract, and it's really not connected to the material idea of people coming together, investing in a central goal, that goal taking off and then being rewarded.
Here's my concern. And this book that I mentioned previously, Delusions of Crowds, he sort of mentions that the South in Britain, there was were two boom busts that happened in like the 16th century, I think, related to stocks. And so much of it was because that idea, although it was way ahead of its time, people weren't really ready for it. And I think that's what this is with this NFT Bitcoin stuff, is that I do see how this could easily be the future. It's decentralized.
I also see a big trap in it. And I see, and
I don't
what
think we're
will
ready
happen
for it.
is that a bunch of unsavory players will get into the market.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another thing about our society being more complex. And again, you can't complain. More people have access to the stock market. You can do it through Robinhood right off your phone. Hey, that's a good thing, I guess, to a certain point. I mean, depending on your feelings about the stock market and its damage to the society and economy, that's a separate discussion. But I mean, you have more access through technology than you ever had before to information and to all this stuff. But, it means you have more dupes getting in. Okay. It means you have more people who come along who are scurrilous or overpromise or what have you. And so, you have this, diluting a bit.
Yeah.
And, ultimately it's a choice, the free will universe, those, and because you also have stories of people making lots of money at a young age. So, we can't, I guess you have to take the good with the bad.
Well, there's a saying. It's like there's no better way to drive yourself crazy than seeing your friends make lots of money. Right. And then that's how we all get on the mania. And that's why.
Well, here's my favorite. If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, Christmas would already be here.
That's a great one. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, it's just, anticipating how you want things to be and how, gosh, it would just be great if everything just was like Christmas and working out perfect. And, it's not quite that way.
Well, we all want the ideal. We all want the ideal. But the
and by
ideal
the
doesn't
way,
exist.
it's the responsibility of our media and our myths, and media is now our myths, to sell that to us. Christmas being another great example of that.
Coca-Cola.
This is the Christmas that we celebrate is probably about 120 years old at the best, because it really started, I think, around the turn of the century. There was a sort of renewed interest in the holiday. It was largely a Christian. It celebrated in a sort of religious way. And then it became this big secular holiday and so on and so forth. And then Coca-Cola turns the green man to the red man in the suit. We call him Santa and so on and so forth. I mean, it's a really fascinating amalgam of a bunch of different, you have the red and white striped mushrooms from the far Lapland north, which play a role. You have Saint Nick,
Claus.
you have the old green man, which is representative of the man who is knowledgeable of nature things. I mean, it's fitting that it comes at 1900, because it's when we're at that transition out, the last throes of an agrarian culture, really. I mean, I guess it's playing out in a few places, but you're in the height of the Industrial Revolution pretty much everywhere all over the world except for the third world. And you're coming out of that agrarian culture. The green man, which Santa was originally in green, represents that old troll, that old wise man, that old hermit, that Gandalf, essentially, who comes out of the woods and provides us with wisdom and herbs to heal our ailments to the modern world.
Wow.
Santa. It's all an illusion.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's okay. So, quantum physics question for you. no, but related to this.
Okay. Not my area of expertise, but I know like a popular science version of quantum mechanics. But go ahead.
Go with your gut. But
sure, I'll be like
as things speed up. Well, so as particles speed up, they go faster. They convert.
Are particles speeding up? I do believe that the solar system, and maybe measurements of temperature, and I think things are getting warmer. I think they see a warming trend across the solar system, but don't quote me on that.
So if that's the case,
mm-hmm.
and things move faster, as they heat up, is time itself going faster? Because 5 minutes to me, 5 minutes doesn't feel like 5 minutes.
Well, that's nostalgia. 5 minutes is not what it used to be. Well, $5 isn't for sure, but 5 minutes isn't what it used to be. Maybe because of this device here, you're used to being entertained. Like today, we had to wait for something today at the pharmacy for like 15 minutes, and I thought it was going to take 5. And 5 minutes in, I had to go out to the car and get my phone because I couldn't do the next 10 minutes without the phone. So maybe in that sense, time has sped up because we're used to more stimulation. It's very rare that a modern adult outside their home is without their phone and not being stimulated by their phone, the radio in the car, the music in the car, what have you. I mean, you're kind of going, if you're waiting in line or you're doing anything remotely unpleasant that your body does not require your hands for, you're going to have that phone in your hand just flipping through whatever.
And again, suspend judgment here, but is it stimulating content that Generally speaking,
No, it's primarily. Sometimes it is. I was reading an article about Mount Everest today that was very stimulating, but it's like a. I
it's
mean, I
very
guess I learned
passive.
something, but
I'd say that what we're doing while we're marking time for 5 minutes while we're waiting in line at the bank, we're all going to have, chiropractors aren't going anywhere. They're going to be doing neck massages from here on out. But while we're there waiting in line, I would say that what we're doing, from what I observe of myself and of others, is very passive. It's like elevator music, right? What we're doing on our phones. I mean, I'll go on Instagram.
Pacifying your consciousness, and it's also very visually driven.
Yes.
It's like you could be listening to conversation, and I know plenty of people who go, "Oh yeah, that's right on," but I'm still flipping through my phone here. I guess I should do it on camera so you can see me flipping through my phone. But they can still auditorily listen. They might be listening to a podcast,
right?
But then also flipping. It's giving these eyeballs that are now mondo stimulated, with screens everywhere, screens at the gas station, screens at the office, screens all over your house, one in every room for most Americans, right? One here, a computer, a screen on your car. There's all this additional information. I was sitting in some restaurant the other day, and they just had a beautiful helicopter shots of the Caribbean. I mean, who doesn't want to look at that? As I was listening to my mom, I found myself distracted looking up there because beautiful blue water. It's hard not to look at, right? So there's a lot of stimulus. And so I think maybe our eyes have gotten used to always having something to look at the same time, when I wouldn't be surprised if eye contact has gone down. The whole thing of like shaking somebody's hand and looking them in the eye. I don't know that that's a value. I was sort of taught that a little bit, maybe a little later in life. I don't know that's the same value that you're seeing taught to the youth. It's not even that handshake thing might be kind of out of vogue now, especially with COVID.
Well, and eye contact. I mean, whenever I go places, and if I ever kind of snap myself out of it, I need to remind myself that we are primates, that we are animals, right? And could you imagine if I'm in the jungle and I come to a clearing and there's gorillas driving around semi trucks, and there's a fully functional gorilla society? I'd be like, what in the hell's going on? That's what we are, right? We're wild animals that have somehow tamed ourselves into whatever this is. And it's very interesting. Again, suspend all judgment.
The thinking ape.
Right.
Yeah. And it's replicated in our brain. You have a reptilian brain here in the lower part that is, wants to eat, kill, fuck, very simple, not a lot of subtles, makes quick decisions. Of course, when you're in fear, you tend to retract back into your reptilian brain. It's a great way to brainwash people. The entire Republican propaganda machine hinges on the reptilian brain. And as you move up into the cerebellum and cerebrum, you get into more complex thought, reflecting our own evolution as creatures.
And with that is that, so when I'm at, my wife loves going to the casino, right? And it's like, when she wins, but you don't get addicted to losing money at the casino, obviously, right? You get addicted to, you're playing the slots, and all of a sudden, bing, 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 bing. And that part of your brain is like, psh. And I'm kind of watching her as she's doing it, because it's very easy when I'm not the one playing the game to be observe what's happening here, right?
Is she having a good time?
She's having a great time. But even just watching her eyes and like seeing what's going on, and I don't mean to pick on my wife. I mean, I would be doing it if I was in her seat winning money, whatever.
Sure.
Point is that this is what's happening. We're still apes interacting with such a society. And it's no wonder that we're getting so encapsulated in the things that are in front of us, right? And the amount of information that we're taking in every second, we are faster at computing this than computers are. But then again, what are the disservices of this? You mentioned the reptilian part, the hypothalamus or hippocampus. I think the hippocampus is apparently shrinking in humans.
Oh, really? That's our reptilian brain.
Yeah, that part of our brain.
That's good. I mean, well, it could be good. I'm sure it'll have consequences if we learn. But to me, that is a natural part of our evolution to evolve perhaps beyond our animal nature. And I mean that kind of that thought that you just shared with me, I'm going to look that up. If you got an article, share it with me
I'm
so
gonna
I don't
mute
have
you.
to burn any energy looking it up. But I mean, that's encouraging because the only way that we would have hope of progressing out of our current set of dilemmas and so forth would in part be if we, well, technology and free energy, but also if we can evolve out of a violence as a solution, as a problem solving solution, you know,
Right.
and take a more holistic approach to humanity, more socialistic approach to humanity, and see things from a, you know, we should be letting our I look forward to more women in being in power. I think that that can be generally, I mean, it can go either
I
way.
look forward to
Obviously, we've
just
had
more
Sarah Palin.
variety in power.
What's that?
I look forward to more variety in general in power,
Yeah,
right?
we need more people of color,
Anytime you
more
have,
new
if
immigrants
say
to, because you
every
know what they
qual,
bring? They
yeah,
bring new energy and they're excited to be there in the job. And because if they are representing women or representing natives or what have you in a council, they're going to do generally. Of course, there's always louts in every group, but
yeah.
they're going to do a good job because they want to represent for their people. They want to take advantage of this more rare opportunity in a white patriarchy to get ahead, and they're going to do something hopefully for their people and all
So
people, and better.
right. Well, and that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
Is when we bring
And that's
people,
another thing we've had this. Remember, we talked about complexity and how everybody's going in different direction. You've also had this complexity and identity. You have, essentially people of color identifying more with their race and the travails of their race than they are with the travails of humanity. You have women, identifying more with women's issues than the issues of humanity. That I mean,
right?
where like they're gonna, yeah, I would have, I would have voted for the climate change plan if the guy who proposed it wasn't a sexist. Now, I don't know if that happened. That's a pigeonhole example. What I'm saying is,
Yes.
where does your value system line up? Are you, yes, I want women's rights, but I'll take human rights first.
Hmm.
That we all progress. Hopefully they're a part of that. Well, they had to be because they're human. I see a lot of people with identity politics, and I see it happen to my students where they get a little bit locked in a crusade for a particular point of view, not even a particular point of view, but for a particular righteously downtrodden group.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the pain is not legitimate or the past has not wrecked with examples of mistreatment and prejudice, but let's expand our consciousness, not just to the identity that we are. And maybe that's easy for me to say as a white male who presumably an older white male presumably has got the fat of the lamb. I can tell you that's not the case, but I do think a higher consciousness would move us into having the ability to have love and concern for all individuals collectively, um, regardless if they look like us or we even know them.
Yes.
Like I want the people in India to have a nice environment. I want that. And when our consciousness gets there, we have a global consciousness, which, by the way, coronavirus and
Mm.
environmental crises that we are facing will demand that. We'll either get there or we'll fail. And we're probably going to fail because, as you say, I don't know that collectively enough of the people are there. Now, there's a vanguard that is. There's a vanguard whose consciousness is totally in global consciousness. They've moved beyond nation states and so forth. But
Yes.
the majority is not there where the vanguard is, you know?
So throughout history, I mean, evolutionary history, they talk about divergent and convergent evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you are also, of course, you're talking a little bit about intersectionality. So there's this group, and then within this group, they all want different things, but it's like, okay, let's focus on the big thing, and then we'll get, our
Well,
differences.
I mean, I think many people would say, well, we've heard that before, and they're right. Very often, the rights of subgroups or racial minorities have been sublimated, you know,
Mhm.
um, I get that there's a trap there too, but I just meant, particularly in my students, I just often see them really going for issues that are particularly connected. I mean, to me, identity politics is the beginning of your consciousness. It's the starting point, not the end point.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
like, oh wow,
I
hey,
agree.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
or and maybe or having an identity conscious for other races and people, even if you're not that. I mean, as a white male, I've had to go through that too, to experience and become more aware of the concerns and the needs and the travails of the Black population and of the female population, just to cite two. And then now learning more about the travails of the gay population and being sympathetic and at least aware and conscious and trying to be an ally in whatever way that I can. That's a growth process,
Oh, yeah. Well, it's easy for me to say too, as a straight white male, from a middle class home. My experiences are my experiences, and I
You're a
can
straight pale male.
I am a very pale male. Yeah, I'm not white. There's no melanin in me. But that
Made me feel
aside,
good about my whiteness.
yeah,
I'm
that's
like an
okay.
orange American right now.
Yeah. You would lose me in a snowstorm, that's for sure. That's why I wear red. But yes.
Well, perhaps we should put a finishing note on it if there's any question or topic, just to try to button it up. And I think we've gone past 30.
Yeah, we definitely have gone past 30. So for it, which always seems to happen, but
yeah,
with our this the coddled youth.
You get me jaw boxing and I just keep going.
Yes, me too. What do they offer as solutions for this? Because
who's they
in this coddling of the American mind?
Oh, truth be told, I have not read the book. I only just discovered it. It's 3 years old, but it got lost in the COVID shuffle.
Do you see? Here's
actually
my
they do
question.
provide some solutions. I think what they talk about essentially is allowing children to fail, allowing them proverbially, this is an analogy, get their knees scraped, to fall down, to be a little less safe, to have interactions with independent of parents, to have unstructured play. This not just in this group. Many other groups have said children need unstructured time. Go play. Okay, not do a chore. That's fine too, but they need unstructured play. This is how they develop, by having tiny, microscopic, meaningless to us interactions with their environment that teach them stories. Oh, you can do that. Oh, you can't do that. And all this different stuff, and with other people. So that, I mean, right off the bat, that's one. But I think they talk about getting away from the helicopter parenting, maybe letting the kids walk home. And there's all these different types of strategies. I mean, if safety is still a concern, how can we create unstructured time, or how can we build a little self-sufficiency? And also saying to that kid, you solve the problem yourself. Not the problem with the youth, and this goes back to our very original conversation, so it's a good button point, is their expectation was that they went to an adult, an authority figure, and complained. So what they were doing, they weren't going to the
and they were given the solution.
Professor do. I didn't like that, and here's why. And could you address my triggers or be more sensitive? They go to the dean to complain, it's just really petty. It's like they don't understand that there's a way to conduct things. They think the way to complain. Now maybe they saw their mother or father doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's learned behavior, that you go above. You have a problem with somebody, you go above their head. We're certainly seeing that in American politics. We saw that sort of childish schoolboy mentality from Donald Trump. He was always just appealing to the next authority. This court
and threatening litigation, right?
Mm-hmm. And by the way, the Supreme Court has been set up that way. It's been sort of permanently or semi-permanently locked into a conservative position, so that ultimately, no matter what cases come down the pike, the conservative traditional position will be held. And the longer that we see this society cling to its traditional values. Not all of which are bad, but that's a loaded term, and I should have really adjusted that term. Cling to outdated values that an increasing majority of the society is leaving behind, and certainly the youth. And by the way, the youth are where we're going. I see a coming clash, and I see the youth acting out. I see potentially some environmental stunts, or you might see a return of people blockading things. In some ways, if they don't do that, then we're really screwed. If through the power of media and the power of the century of self, which is what the 20th century was, this sort of indulging of the self, they've become so encapsulated with this false world that's been created to seduce them, that the trees are going to die. I'll be fine as long as I've got my Sega, or as long as I got my games and what have you. Sorry, that reference dated me. As long as if that's their response, then we're really and truly in deep doo-doo.
One thing that I see too is the need to we can't be afraid of conflict.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflict.
And how to have conflict. I think it's A, how to face conflict, and B, how to have it, right? Yeah. It's not about like, well, you wear a stupid plaid shirt. It's like, no, that's an ad hominem. Let's talk about what we need to talk about.
And when we see conflicts escalating to shootings, there's a couple of months in America where somebody goes to the car to get somebody pops the trunk.
Yeah.
And goes and pulls out whatever they got in there and goes back in to settle this argument. And it happens a lot. There's a lot of unresolved anger. I read today on Facebook a guy who dumped 20 tons of manure on his boss's front lawn, lying and saying it was on his own lawn.
Mm-hmm.
So now presumably the guy's got to pay to have it removed. and he here's the thing: he had just won the lottery.
Oh, okay.
Now he got arrested. I don't know if he'll do time, but there'll be a fine, and he'll be on
he
probation.
Won the lottery, and
this was
big F you to the boss.
One of the things I want to do. I want to spend I think a couple $100,000. Yeah, because 20 tons of shit's a lot of shit. And I think he spent that money to get back at his former boss, a boss who he undoubtedly was leaving the job anyway. I mean, he had the money, but there's an example of unresolved conflict. It's so important for me. I'm on easy street. I've achieved what most Americans see as a fantasy: winning the lottery. It's why so many of them play it. And he still wants to go back, put his life in jeopardy by doing this illegal act. Fascinating.
That is actually quite fascinating.
Well, let's leave it. Let's leave it on the manure dumping story.
Beautiful. I'll shit you later.
Well, hey, thanks for asking, and I hope you enjoyed. And send me the link, or I guess as you already have, send me the link, and let me know when it's up, and I'd love to check it out and maybe share it with some folks.
Sounds good. Next time, conflict.